I was never supposed to be on that plane. A simple scheduling mix-up changed my life forever. Another flight attendant shared my name, and by mistake, I was assigned to Flight 367 on January 26, 1972. I was young, eager to travel, and excited for the journey. The only thing on my mind was my hidden health condition. I suffered from dangerously low blood pressure, something I had carefully concealed from the airline by drinking strong black coffee before every medical exam. As I walked toward the aircraft that cold winter morning in Copenhagen, I had no idea that the very condition I tried so hard to hide would soon become the reason I survived. The aircraft was a marvel of its era, a sleek twin-engine jet that felt like a sanctuary of modern engineering. I boarded the plane and immediately set to work with the rest of the crew. The cabin was a narrow tunnel of upholstered seats, thick carpets, and the hum of fluorescent lighting. We welcomed the passengers boarding in Copenhagen. There were 23 of them. I remember their faces in fragments, brief flashes of humanity passing by me in the aisle. There were businessmen in heavy wool suits, reading newspapers, families traveling together, people talking quietly, laughing, settling into the routine comfort of air travel. I walked up and down the aisle, performing the incredibly mundane choreography of my profession. I checked the overhead bins, secured the latches, smiled, and demonstrated the safety procedures. The irony of those safety demonstrations is something that I can barely think about now. We tell people how to fasten a seatbelt, how to use an oxygen mask, how to brace for an emergency landing, entirely ignoring the fact that if a bomb detonates at 33,000 feet, a seatbelt is nothing more than a metal clasp holding a corpse to a chair. As we taxied to the runway and the engines roared to life, the vibrations rattling through the floorboards, everything felt flawlessly normal. We climbed rapidly through the heavy winter clouds, breaking through the overcast sky into the blinding, brilliant sunlight of the upper atmosphere. Cruising altitude: 10,000 meters, 33,000 feet. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft chime. I moved to the rear of the aircraft, near the galleys, to begin the drink service. I remember pulling the heavy metal food cart from its bay. I remember the smell of the coffee brewing in the galley. I remember the exact temperature of the cabin air. And then, time stopped. There was no warning, no sudden plunge, no turbulence, no shouting from the cockpit. The bomb, which investigators later determined had been hidden inside a briefcase in the forward baggage compartment by a Croatian nationalist group, detonated with a catastrophic, instantaneous violence that the human brain is simply not equipped to process. An explosion at that altitude does not behave like an explosion on the ground. It is an immediate, catastrophic failure of physics. The blast tore through the structural integrity of the fuselage in a fraction of a millisecond. The pressurized cabin, which had been keeping 28 souls alive in a hostile, freezing vacuum, ruptured. The phenomenon of explosive decompression is absolute and terrifying. The air inside the cabin instantly turned into a thick, freezing, blinding fog as the internal pressure violently equalized with the thin stratosphere. The noise was not a boom, it was a physical shockwave, a concussive force that shattered every eardrum on the plane and violently crushed the breath from our lungs. The aircraft, traveling at hundreds of miles per hour, could not withstand the aerodynamic stress of the gaping hole in its side. The metal shrieked, a sound of unimaginable mechanical agony, and the plane ripped entirely in half. The front section, containing the cockpit, the wings, and the majority of the passengers, broke away and immediately began a chaotic, tumbling plunge toward the earth. I was in the severed tail section. In the exact millisecond the plane tore apart, the violent, howling rush of depressurized air sucked passengers, luggage, and seats out into the void. They were gone into the freezing sky before their synapses could even register the concept of fear. But I did not fly out. The heavy metal catering cart I had just pulled from the galley, dislodged by the violent, sudden G-forces of the explosion, slammed backward, pinning my fragile body against the rear bulkhead of the fuselage. That cart, an ordinary piece of catering equipment used to serve sandwiches and juice, became the iron anchor that trapped me inside the shattered, spinning tail section as it began its descent into the abyss. Then began the fall. 33,000 feet, over 6 miles straight down. At that altitude, the environment is fundamentally hostile to human biology. The air temperature is roughly 60 degrees below 0 Celsius. The oxygen concentration is so low that a human being will lose consciousness in a matter of seconds, and that, in the strange, twisted, incomprehensible irony of the universe, is the only reason I am alive to tell this story. As the tail section violently tumbled out of the sky, flipping and spinning wildly through the thin air, subjecting my pinned body to massive, tearing centrifugal forces, the hypoxia, the extreme lack of oxygen, caused my brain to instantly shut down. I blacked out. But it was not just unconsciousness. It was a profound physiological shutdown dictated by my hidden medical flaw. My naturally low blood pressure became my ultimate shield. When a human being falls from the sky, the sheer, unimaginable terror triggers an adrenal response so massive that the heart beats frantically, pumping blood so fast that it can literally burst the blood vessels and rupture the heart before the body ever hits the ground. But because my blood pressure was already so low, and because I was immediately rendered comatose by the lack of oxygen, my heart did not race. It slowed. My vascular system did not violently expand. My body entered a state of suspended animation, a forced biological hibernation. I was not a terrified 22-year-old girl screaming in the rushing wind. I was a dormant organism, a passenger in a falling metal coffin, plunging through the freezing clouds, completely and blissfully unaware of my own impending annihilation. The physics of a fall from that altitude are absolute and unforgiving. A human body, or a piece of heavy machinery, accelerates rapidly until it reaches terminal velocity, the point where the drag of the air equals the downward pull of gravity. The tail section of the DC-9, with me pinned inside its wreckage, became a twisted, aerodynamic missile, screaming toward the snow-covered mountains of Czechoslovakia. I fell for approximately 3 minutes. 3 minutes is an eternity. It is enough time to boil water, enough time to listen to a song, enough time to realize you are going to die 100 times over. But for me, it was 3 minutes of absolute, merciful nothingness. The tail section tumbled through the stratosphere, tearing through the freezing cirrus clouds, spiraling down through the troposphere, the air growing thicker, the friction roaring against the torn, jagged metal of the fuselage. And then came the impact. The earth does not negotiate. When metal and flesh hit solid ground at terminal velocity, the result is almost universally total, catastrophic annihilation. But the universe is a tapestry woven with impossible threads, and the circumstances of my impact defied every known law of probability. The tail section of the plane did not hit a flat, unforgiving concrete runway, nor did it strike a sheer, solid rock face. Instead, it crashed into a densely wooded, steep mountain slope near the small Czechoslovakian village of Serbs Kamenice. The massive, ancient pine trees of the forest acted as a brutal but effective natural suspension system. As the heavy wreckage tore through the canopy, the thick trunks and heavy branches shattered and snapped, absorbing massive, critical amounts of the kinetic energy, slowing the twisting metal down fraction by fraction of a second before it reached the ground. Furthermore, the mountain slope was steep, meaning the wreckage did not hit at a perpendicular angle, but rather glanced along the incline. And finally, the ground itself was covered in a remarkably thick, deep blanket of fresh winter snow. The angle of the mountain, the shattering of the trees, and the deep snowpack created the most improbable, impossible cushion in the history of aviation. Even with those miraculous mitigating factors, the impact was still unimaginably violent. The kinetic energy had to go somewhere, and it went directly into my body. The heavy food cart that had kept me inside the plane was crushed violently against me. My skull fractured in multiple places, causing a massive hemorrhage inside my brain. Both of my legs were shattered, the bones splintering from the massive compressive forces. 3 of my vertebrae were crushed completely, the trauma instantly severing the delicate neural pathways and paralyzing me from the waist down. My ribs were broken, my pelvis was fractured in several places, and my internal organs were subjected to massive blunt force trauma. I was a broken, bleeding, crushed doll, buried deep in the twisted, smoking wreckage of the tail section, surrounded by the freezing, eerie silence of the winter forest. Out of the 28 people on that aircraft, 27 were dead. Their bodies had been scattered across the mountainside, subjected to forces no human can endure. I was the absolute last one left, and I was lingering on the incredibly razor-thin edge between life and death, bleeding out into the snow. If I had crashed in a remote, inaccessible part of the wilderness, I would have succumbed to my massive injuries or frozen to death in a matter of minutes. But the miracles of that day were not finished, and the next miracle arrived in the form of a man named Bruno Honky. Bruno was a local villager who had heard the massive explosion high in the sky and the terrifying, ground-shaking roar of the crash. He did not run away. He ran directly into the freezing woods, navigating the burning debris, the smell of jet fuel, and the horrific, unspeakable carnage of the scattered bodies. Bruno Honky was not just a villager. He was a former medic who had served in the German army during the Second World War. He was a man who knew exactly what violent death looked like, and crucially, he knew how to treat massive, catastrophic trauma. In the eerie, smoking silence of the forest, he heard a sound. It was me, unconsciously screaming in the dark, trapped beneath the twisted metal. He found me pinned, my body twisted, broken, and rapidly losing blood. Any ordinary, well-meaning person might have panicked and tried to pull me free, inadvertently shifting my crushed vertebrae, severing my spinal cord completely, and killing me instantly. But Bruno knew better. He carefully cleared the debris from my face to allow me to breathe. He applied pressure to my bleeding wounds, and he kept me warm, stabilizing my severely broken body in the freezing cold until the rescue teams finally arrived. He held the fragile, fraying thread of my life in his bare hands, and he absolutely refused to let it snap. I remember none of this. The human brain is a remarkable mechanism of self-preservation. When it is subjected to physical and psychological trauma that would entirely shatter the psyche, it simply turns off the recording. It builds a thick, impenetrable wall of amnesia to protect the soul from the horrors the body has endured. My very first memory, the first flicker of consciousness, is waking up in a stark hospital room in Prague nearly a month later. I had been in a deep coma. The air smelled sharply of antiseptic, iodine, and bleach. The room was stark white, and the rhythmic hum and beep of medical equipment replaced the roar of the jet engines I had last heard. I tried to move, and a wave of incomprehensible, suffocating, blinding agony washed over every single nerve in my body. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't move my torso. My head was encased in heavy bandages, throbbing with a dark, heavy pain. I looked around, confused, terrified, my vision blurry, and I saw a doctor and my parents standing by the bed. My parents were crying, their faces etched with a grief, exhaustion, and relief so profound it looked like physical pain. I looked at them, and in a raspy, weak voice, I asked for a cigarette. It was the absurd, wildly mundane request of a girl who had absolutely no idea she had just fallen from the stratosphere. The doctor, staring at me with a look of absolute disbelief, handed me one. It was only later, as the days turned into weeks, as the fog of the coma lifted, that they finally told me what had happened. They handed me a newspaper. I looked at the front page, and there was my face, staring back at me under a massive headline. They told me about the bomb in the baggage hold. They told me about the aircraft tearing apart in the sky. They told me about the altitude, 33,000 feet, 10,000 meters. And then, they told me the heaviest truth of all, that everyone else was gone, and I was the only survivor. The weight of that knowledge is heavier than the gravity that pulled me to the earth. Surviving an impossible, catastrophic event does not feel like a victory. It does not feel like you have conquered death. It feels like a profound, unanswerable, suffocating question. Why me? Why did the young girl sitting in the front of the plane die while I lived? Why did the families, the businessmen, the children perish while my hidden medical condition and a rogue food cart conspired to keep me breathing? Survivor's guilt is a relentless parasite that eats away at the soul in the dark. You are haunted by the ghosts of those who fell with you. You wake up in the middle of the night, covered in a cold sweat, not remembering the fall itself, but feeling the profound, crushing, echoing absence of the people who didn't walk away. You are thrust into a global spotlight you never asked for. The world looks at you not as a human being who has suffered a massive trauma, but as a medical anomaly, a statistical impossibility, a living myth. I was entered into the Guinness Book of World Records for the highest fall survived without a parachute. They gave me an award. Paul McCartney, my absolute idol, handed it to me. But I didn't want a record. I didn't want fame. I just wanted my legs back. I just wanted my quiet, ordinary, unremarkable life back. The physical recovery was a grueling, torturous descent into a completely different kind of hell. The human body is fragile, easily broken by the forces of the universe, but it is also stubbornly, furiously resilient. I was completely paralyzed from the waist down due to the crushed vertebrae in my spine. The doctors in Prague and later in Belgrade told my parents that I would likely never walk again, that the sheer magnitude of the spinal trauma was irreversible and absolute. But the will to live, once fully ignited, is a fire that refuses to be put out by medical prognoses or statistics. I underwent multiple, agonizing surgeries. Surgeons cut into my back to fuse my shattered spine. They rebuilt my splintered legs with pins and metal. They worked to relieve the immense pressure on my healing brain. I spent months locked in a heavy, suffocating, full-body cast, staring at the ceiling of the hospital room, trapped inside a broken shell, fighting the dark depression that threatened to swallow me whole. The pain was a constant, screaming companion, a brutal, daily reminder of the violent kinetic energy that had coursed through my bones. But I refused to remain broken. I was a remarkably stubborn woman. When the casts finally came off, I began the grueling, agonizing process of physical therapy. I had to reteach my brain how to communicate with muscles that had been severed from its control for months. Every single tiny twitch of a toe, every millimeter of movement, was a massive battle fought with blood, sweat, and endless tears. The physical therapist pushed me beyond my limits, and I pushed myself further. Months turned into a year. Slowly, agonizingly, the sensation began to return to my limbs. The nerves, bruised, battered, but miraculously not entirely severed, slowly began to fire again. I learned to sit up without fainting. I learned to stand, heavily supported by thick metal braces and the strong arms of my nurses. And eventually, defying every medical expectation, defying the very laws of physics that had tried to destroy me in the sky, I took a step. I walked again. I walked with a permanent limp, my spine forever twisted and scarred, my body a living, breathing map of a catastrophic impact, but I walked. People always ask me if I am afraid of flying now. They expect me to say yes, to tell them that the mere sight of an airplane sends me into a panic, that I refuse to set foot on an aircraft ever again. But the strange, honest truth is, I am not afraid. Because my brain protected me, because I have absolutely no memory of the crash, the explosion, or the terror of the fall, the psychological fear never took root in my mind. In fact, after my physical recovery was complete, I wanted to go back to work. I wanted to put my uniform back on. I wanted to be a flight attendant again. I missed the routine. I missed the travel. I missed the sky. I asked JAT to put me back on the flight roster, but they absolutely refused. They were terrified of the public relations implications. They gave me a desk job instead, negotiating freight contracts, keeping me grounded, hiding their miraculous survivor away in an office. They didn't understand that for me, the sky was not a graveyard. The sky was just the sky. The explosion was the act of men, the malice of terrorists, the cruelty of human violence and politics. Gravity was just an indifferent force of nature. Nature did not try to kill me maliciously. It just behaved the only way it knew how. And the trees and the snow of that mountain, in their own silent, indifferent way, had reached out and caught me. We spend our entire lives believing that we are in absolute control of our destinies. We make intricate plans, we look at our schedules, we board our flights, we drink our coffee, and we assume we know exactly how our story is going to unfold. But the universe is chaotic, entirely unpredictable, and bound by laws that care absolutely nothing for our human plans. I was a young girl who just wanted to see the world, and I became the woman who fell from the edge of space and lived to tell a tale I couldn't even remember. My survival was a symphony of impossible, microscopic coincidences, the mix-up in my schedule, The food cart that pinned me, the low blood pressure that stopped my heart from bursting, the specific angle of the mountain, the deep, fresh snow, and the war medic who found me in the dark. If a single one of those microscopic variables had been altered by a fraction of a degree, I would have simply been a name on a memorial plaque, a footnote in a tragedy. Life is not a guaranteed right. It is a fragile, incredibly temporary gift held in place by forces we cannot see, cannot control, and do not understand. Surviving a 33,000-foot fall did not make me a superhero. It made me profoundly, deeply aware of my own fragile humanity. It taught me that we are vulnerable, that our bodies can be broken in a fraction of a second, but it also taught me that the human spirit is an anchor heavier and stronger than gravity itself. You can be thrown from the sky, you can be shattered against the rocks, you can be paralyzed and told you will never walk again. But as long as you are still breathing, you have a choice. You can surrender to the fall, or you can drag yourself out of the snow, rebuild your broken spine, and force yourself to take another step. I chose to step. I chose to live.